For lack of room, we cannot give a report of each of the 5 conferences in Texas that held their sessions last week, November 4th to 8th. We give the appointments this week, and in future issues of The Advocate, we'll give such items as appear to be of special interest. The Houston meeting was unique in that 5 of our own conferences and 1 of the ME Church held their sessions simultaneously in that city. In this particular, it was epical. For months, we have been predicting that this would be the greatest Methodist meeting ever held, and now that it is over, we do not hesitate to say that it was just that. On the train, as he was returning to his home, Dr. Ivan Lee Holt wrote, "Never have I seen any gathering in American Methodism which is of such significance. I appreciate the privilege of having a part in it, and I want to thank you for the invitation." Naturally, it was not altogether easy to hold so many conferences at once. Those who planned the meeting realized all along that there would be difficulties, but we felt that the advantages in such a mighty mobilization of Texas Methodism would outweigh the disadvantages. We have been asked many times to estimate the attendance. The newspapers put it at 10,000, and their guess is as good as any. Texans were there from every section of the biggest state in the world. They were there from the lowlands along the Sabine and from the highlands of the Staked Plains, from Texarkana to Brownsville, from city, town, and country community. It was a great host, and it is not unimportant that Texas Methodists enter the new century of Texas history knowing each other better than ever before. It was a delight to see them greeting each other in hotel lobbies, on the streets, in the churches and auditorium. Friendships were formed that will last through the years. Many came from places outside Texas, and not infrequently they were heard to say that they would go back and try to have united meetings in their own states, patterned after this Texas meeting. Those present on Sunday evening when we gathered for the reading of the appointments saw a sight worth going a long journey to see. At the service, the lower floor in the auditorium was reserved for the preachers. Gathered there in one solid block were approximately 3 times as many Methodist preachers as there were in the world at the time of John Wesley's death in 1791. How those preachers could sing! As they joined in some of the old-time choruses, they fairly shook the rafters. Waves of melody swept across that great gathering like the waves of the sea, now advancing, now receding, but ever playing on the heartstrings of the hearers. If you were not there, dear reader, it is a pity, for the chances are you will never hear anything to equal it until you hear the hosts singing on the banks of the River of Life. The program was great in every way, and with one exception, there was no hitch in it. Much to the regret of everyone, the pageant had to be canceled because the acoustics in the auditorium were too poor for that sort of program. Because of this, and because some business of the conferences had to be completed Saturday afternoon, the meeting we had planned for that afternoon was held Saturday night. All other meetings were held according to the original plan. The first joint mass meeting was at First Methodist Church Thursday afternoon. Reverend J. O. Hames of Amarillo presided, and Dr. Ivan Lee Holt, well known and well loved in Texas, was the speaker. Hundreds were turned away from this service for lack of room. Dr. Holt is pastor of St. John's Methodist Episcopal Church South, St. Louis, and president of the Federal Council of the Churches of Christ in America. All 6 of the conferences held business sessions Wednesday evening in 6 Houston churches. The Baptists, Presbyterian, and Christians put their churches at the disposal of the Methodists so all the conferences could meet in the downtown area. At 9:30 that evening, the great First Methodist Church choir of 90 members under the direction of Walter Jenkins rendered a delightful program of church music. Late as it was and tired as the visitors were after long journeys to reach the city, the large church was filled even to standing room, and many were turned away. Thursday evening, the first great meeting in the auditorium was held. It was a notable gathering of church leaders, clerical and lay. On the platform were 8 bishops and many general board officers, along with a sprinkling of church editors and secretaries and other offices of the various conferences. Bishop Edwin Holt Hughes of Washington, D.C., senior bishop of the M.E. Church, was the speaker. He is the most triumphant speaker on the American platform today. His address was an imaginary interview with Francis Asbury. It was a perfect literary and historic gem, and one of the most unique addresses this writer ever heard. Unique, radiant, humorous, and compelling as entertainment, he used it to drive home great fundamental truths this generation of Methodists needs to know. Friday morning, several hundred preachers had breakfast together at the Rice Hotel. Bishop H.A. Bowes presided, and again Bishop Hughes was the speaker. He spoke with great tenderness and frankness on the ministry of consolation. Bishop Hughes has been preaching 50 years, and his father before him was a preacher. He knows the heart of the preacher and his task. He is sympathetic and has a consummate mastery of musical and persuasive rhetoric. That one service was worth the trip of any Texas Methodist preacher to Houston. Friday afternoon, there was another great meeting at First Methodist Church. Dr. J.W. Mills of Beaumont presided, and Bishop George A. Miller was the speaker. Bishop Miller spent many years in South America as a missionary and a bishop. He spoke on 100% Americanism and gave a most revealing and interesting picture of the people in that continent. Then came Friday evening and another meeting in the auditorium. The meeting was sponsored by the boards of lay activities of the participating conferences. Dean E.D. Jennings of Southern Methodist University presided, and the conference lay leaders and associates were on the platform. The first address was by George L. Morlock of Nashville, General Secretary of the Board of Lay Activities. Mr. Morlock knows his work and is known throughout the church. His address was in every way worthy of the occasion, though he was filling in for Governor Senate Connor, who was scheduled to speak but found he could not fill the engagement. Dr. Roy L. Smith, pastor of First Methodist Episcopal Church, Los Angeles, was the other speaker. He is a brilliant platform man, a well-known publicist, and a world traveler. There wasn't a dull minute while he was on the floor, and whenever he comes this way again, he is assured a good hearing. Saturday evening was another great meeting. Bishop A. Frank Smith presided, and Senator Morris Shepherd was the speaker. Senator Shepherd is a great favorite with Texas Methodists. He was reared in the Methodist Church and is a loyal Methodist now. For many years, he has been the acknowledged temperance leader in the Congress and is just as loyal to the prohibition cause now as before repeal was voted. We heard him with high appreciation as he spoke on Texas. The sunrise service Sunday morning at Herman Park was greatly enjoyed by a congregation that comfortably filled the available seats. Bishop Meade presided, and Dr. C.C. Selectman delivered an address of great tenderness and power. Sunday afternoon, the ordination service was held. Bishop Edwin D. Mouzon preached the ordination sermon and presided at the service that followed. 54 or 55 men were ordained. We cannot be sure of the exact number until we have the records before us. It was a beautiful and impressive service. First, the deacons were ordained by Bishop Bowes, Bishop Smith, and Bishop Meade, each ordaining the men in his conferences. Then the elders were called to the chancel, and after examination, these 3 bishops, with the assistance of Bishop Mouzon and Bishop Moore, ordained them. The wives of the candidates for ordination kneeled with their husbands as they were ordained. The closing service Sunday evening was so interesting and inspiring, it is not easy to describe it. The audience was an overflow one. The address was by Bishop Meade, and then as Bishop Moore, who was presiding, called the conferences in the order, designated the bishop in charge of that conference, stood and read the appointments of the preachers. The order observed was Northwest Texas, read by Bishop Bowes. Southern, read by Bishop Meade. West Texas, read by Bishop Bowes. North Texas, read by Bishop Smith. Central Texas, read by Bishop Bowes. Texas, read by Bishop Smith. Never before in the history of the Methodist Church in this country have so many preachers received their appointments at one service. A Methodist preacher was appointed to every community in Texas with the exception of that section that is in New Mexico Conference. Reading these appointments consumed about 1 hour and 15 minutes. In all the general meetings, Mr. Walter Jenkins, a superb song leader, led the people in singing. The 2 grand pianos in the auditorium were presided at by Mr. Herbert Ruloff and Miss Agnes Weeks.